The broom rasped across warped floorboards, dust rising like a ghost in the hollow light. Clara's sleeves were rolled to the elbow, her hands red with live water. She moved quick and silent, as if chased by something only she could see. Behind her, the widower sat heavy in a creaking chair, hat tilted low against the sun sneaking through the window slats. Jacob Holloway had watched cattle stampede and men die of thirst, but watching this woman scour his dead wife's floor made his chest ache in ways he couldn't name. The bucket clattered. Clara bent, wrung the rag, and caught him staring. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Wind rattled the shutters. A raven croaked out on the fence line. Jacob cleared his throat. Don't need it clean enough to eat off. Her eyes flicked up, steady cool. Then you should have hired another woman. The chair groaned as he leaned forward. I hired you to clean, not... A sharp knock split the moment. Both turned. At the door stood a rider, dust-caked, his hand resting too easy on the butt of a pistol. He grinned with no warmth. Evening, Holloway. Word is you're hiring help. His eyes slid over Clara, lingered. Didn't know you liked your floors scrubbed by angels. Jacob stood, slow, voice flat. Ain't your business who I hire. The rider chuckled, tipped his hat, but his gaze stayed nailed on Clara. Just passing by. Kenyon's busy these days. You watch yourself. He spat, mounted, and rode off, leaving hoofbeats fading into silence. Clara returned to scrubbing without a word. But Jacob saw it. The way her jaw had set like stone, the rag twisting harder in her hands. By sundown, the house smelled faintly of soap and boiled potatoes. Clara set a plate down before him. Steam rising. He muttered thanks, but she was already moving, sweeping ashes from a hearth. He watched her in the glow of lamplight, the way her shadow leaned tall against the wall. Too steady for a cleaning woman, too sharp in her silences. Outside, the coyotes began their long cry. Jacob lifted his fork, but his appetite was gone. The next morning broke raw and cold. A red sun clawed through torn clouds. Jacob stepped out onto the porch and saw Clara already in the yard, hanging laundry, arms pale against the wind. She paused, eyes scanning the horizon. Jacob followed her gaze. Across the canyon rim, far off, 3 horsemen watched the ranch, motionless as stones. Neighbors? She asked, voice low. He shook his head. Ain't the neighborly kind. When he looked again, the riders were gone, swallowed by the ridge. By noon, Claire was in the barn, broom stirring hay and dust. Jacob leaned in the doorway, pipe unlit, watching. She worked with her back straight, shoulders squared, like a soldier carrying out orders. Don't need to bother with the barn, he said. I don't bother, she answered. I finish. His eyes narrowed. You ever been here before? She stopped, turned slow. Why? He pointed at a post. That hole there, bullet scar. You looked at it first thing you stepped in. Clara's hand tightened on the broom. Her voice was even, but it scraped. You keep secrets, Holloway. I keep mine. The air hung heavy between them, filled with the scent of horses and old gunpowder. That night, thunder rolled, but no rain came. The wind clawed through cracks in the windows. Jacob sat at the table, a bottle untouched before him. Clara moved in the kitchen, the clink of crockery steady as a heartbeat. He spoke without looking up. House feels different. She glanced over. Because it's clean? He shook his head. Because it's alive. Her face softened, only for a flicker. Then the mask came back. She stacked plates, turned away, and the room filled with silence thicker than any dust she'd swept from his floor. By week's end, the ranch was near unrecognizable. Curtains washed, floors shining, broken hinges mended. Yet Jacob felt no peace. He caught her staring into the canyon at dusk, as if waiting for something or someone. On the 7th night, a sound split the quiet. Hoofbeats, closer than before. Jacob stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Clara stood already at the edge of the yard, still as stone, her eyes on the dark horizon. The riders came no farther, only circled once. Torches flaring, then vanished into the black mouth of the canyon. Jacob lowered the rifle, breath hard. "They'll come back," he muttered. Clara didn't move. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Then be ready." For the first time, he looked at her not as a cleaning woman, but as someone who carried storms in her silence. And in the hush that followed, even the night wind seemed to wait for what would come next. The lantern guttered, shadows crawling along the walls as the door shuddered under a sudden wind. Jacob shoved it shut, bolt sliding home with a hard snap. Outside, the night howled across the canyon, carrying the faint echo of hoofbeats that never seemed to end. Clara stood by the window, curtain pulled back just enough to watch. Her face was pale in the glow, eyes sharp as if each flicker of torchlight on the ridge carved itself into her memory. "They're closer tonight," Jacob muttered, setting his rifle across the table. Clara didn't turn. Closer every night. The silence between them stretched, broken only by the hiss of the lantern. At dawn, smoke curled from the canyon rim. Thin, deliberate, a signal. Jacob's cattle shifted uneasy in the pasture, tails lashing, eyes rolling white. Clara came out of the barn with a bucket, froze, and set it down. Her gaze stayed locked on the horizon. "Outlaws?" Jacob asked. "Not neighbors," she answered. He spit into the dirt, jaw tight. "Towns say it's just boys stirring trouble." Her voice was low, clipped. "Boys don't carry torches. Boys don't watch like wolves." The wind picked up, scattering dust between them. By afternoon, Clara was at the hearth, sleeves dusted with flour, hands steady as she shaped dough. Jacob sat nearby, mending a saddle strap, but his eyes never left her. "You don't scare easy," he said finally, her hands still for a breath. "Fear wastes time." He leaned forward. "Most women have packed and run days ago." Her gaze lifted, holding his. For a moment, her mask slipped, and Jacob saw not coldness, but grief sharpened into steel. "Most women ain't me." The room held its breath after she spoke. The smell of baking bread was thick, but beneath it lingered the raw sting of secrets unspoken. That evening, Jacob rode into town for supplies. The saloon was thick with smoke and gossip, boots thudding on warped planks. Canyon gangs grown bold. A rancher muttered at the bar. "Burned a homestead yonder last week. Sheriff don't lift a finger." Another man leaned close, voice low. "Heard tell a woman once. Gun quicker than lightning, eyes like a hawk. They called her the vulture. Said she vanished after blood was spilled." Jacob froze, knuckles whitening around his glass. The barkeep snorted. "Stories. Ghost tales. No woman carries iron like that." But Jacob wasn't listening anymore. His mind replayed the way Clara's hands gripped a broom handle, the way she stared at the horizon, unblinking. He returned at midnight, the ranch cloaked in silence. Clara was awake, seated by the cold ashes of the hearth, her shoulders rigid. "You heard it too, didn't you?" he asked. She didn't answer, only stared into the dead fire. "Clara." Finally, her voice, soft but edged. "Ghosts don't vanish, Jacob. They wait. They follow." The lantern burned low between them, throwing long shadows across the walls. Morning came with the stench of smoke drifting from the canyon. Clara was outside already, apron tied, eyes fixed on the rim. Jacob stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "They're marking us," he said. "They're watching," she corrected. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "If you know something—" Her head turned sharp. "What I know won't help you sleep." Their eyes locked, tension pulling taut. The ground itself seemed to hold still, waiting. The day dragged. Cattle bawled restless in the heat. Dogs paced the fence line. Dust coiled in the air. Clara kept her work, scrubbing, cooking, mending. But every so often her eyes slid to the horizon, sharp and unyielding. By dusk, the sky burned crimson. The canyon swallowed the last light, and from its depths came a sound. Low, cruel laughter, carried by the wind. Jacob stiffened, fingers tightening around his rifle. Clara didn't flinch. She stood at the doorway, face set hard, and whispered words he almost didn't hear. "They're testing us." Night fell heavy. The outlaws didn't come, but their presence clung like smoke. Jacob sat with his back to the wall, rifle laid across his knees. Across the room, Clara sat at the table, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. Finally, Jacob broke the silence. You clean my house like you're scrubbing blood off the floor. You watch the horizon like it owes you a debt. Who are you, Clara? Her gaze lifted, steady as stone. Someone who's already buried too much. The lantern sputtered, shadows deepening around her words, and Jacob knew then that the woman he'd hired to clean carried a past heavy enough to shake the canyon itself. And outside, the wolves waited, their torches burning in the dark. The flames leapt high against the night, fence posts snapping in the fire. Jacob swung a bucket of water, teeth gritted, but the blaze roared louder than his efforts. From the shadows of the canyon, laughter rang out, low, cruel, taunting. Clara moved through the smoke, face streaked with ash, eyes hard. She grabbed the bucket from his hands, tossed it onto the fire, then turned her head toward the ridge. The torchlight of riders flickered there, watching, waiting. They'll bleed you dry, she said, voice raw. Jacob's chest heaved. I can't fight a dozen men alone. Her gaze stayed locked on the ridge. No, you can't. At dawn, the ranch smoldered. Charred fence posts leaned like gravestones. Jacob stood in the yard, fists knotted. I should sell, he muttered. Let the land rot and be done. Clara was mending a torn shirt by the steps, needle glinting in the sun. She didn't look up. And run like the others? He turned on her. You think I'm a coward? Her eyes rose, sharp, unflinching. I think you're tired of burying things you love. The words cut deep. Jacob's throat worked, but no answer came. That evening, he woke to the sound of metal. Slipping from his chair, rifle in hand, he moved toward the barn. The door creaked open just enough for him to see. Clara stood alone in the half-light, revolver in her hands, her stance low, steady. She drew, fired at a knotted post. The shot cracking like thunder. The slug hit dead center. Jacob froze, disbelief clawing through him. She holstered, drew again, faster. Another shot, another strike. Her arms were sure, movements honed like a blade sharpened for years. Clara, he said, voice rough. She spun, gun raised, eyes blazing. Recognition softened her grip, but not her stance. You weren't supposed to see this, she whispered. He stepped forward, slow. Where'd you learn that? Her chest rose and fell. For a moment, silence pressed hard. Then she lowered the revolver, shoulders sagging beneath a weight unseen. I told myself I was done. Her voice cracked, then hardened, but the past don't stay buried. Jacob searched her face. Who are you? She looked away, out toward the canyon. They call me the Vulture. The name hung between them like smoke. Jacob's pulse thundered. I heard the stories, he said. A woman gunfighter, faster than any man alive, said she vanished after. Her voice cut sharp. After my family was cut down in the crossfire, men who thought themselves kings. I swore never to raise a gun again. Swore I'd be just another face. Another pair of hands. Her fingers trembled against the revolver's grip. But some debts don't fade. The night deepened, coyotes wailing in the distance. Jacob leaned against the stall post, eyes heavy with something between fear and awe. You came here to hide. Clara's head shook once, slow. I came here to work, to scrub floors until the ghosts stopped screaming. Her gaze met his then, sharp as flint. But I see it in your eyes, Jacob. You'd rather burn your ranch than fight. You think grief's a hole so deep it can't be filled. His jaw tightened. And you? You think killing again will bring peace? Her lips pressed then. No, but it might stop the fire from spreading. 3 nights later, the outlaws came again. Torches lined the ridge like hungry stars. A voice bellowed from the dark. Holloway, time's up. Hand over your stock, or we take it with your blood. Jacob leveled his rifle, heart pounding. Beside him, Clara stepped into the yard, revolver in hand, her stance certain. Jacob's breath caught. You mean to fight them? Her eyes never left the ridge. I mean to finish what they started long ago. The torches swayed closer, laughter echoing off the canyon walls. Clara's finger rested on the trigger, calm as the grave. Jacob watched her, the woman he'd hired only to clean, standing in the dust like a storm ready to break. And in that moment, he knew the past she carried was about to roar back to life. Gunfire cracked against the canyon walls, echoes sharp as lightning. Splinters flew from the barn door where Jacob crouched, rifle braced, breath ragged. Bullets hissed past, thudding into the posts. Clara stood in the yard, dust swirling around her boots, revolver steady in her grip. Her face was carved in stone, eyes burning against the torchlight of the outlaws who circled like wolves. A rider charged, pistol raised. Clara turned, fired once, clean, quick. The man toppled from the saddle, body striking the earth with a dull thud. The horses screamed, scattering. Jacob shouted, "Get down!" But Clara didn't move. She walked forward to the gun smoke, firing again, each shot striking true. The outlaws faltered, their jeers twisting into shouts of fear. "She's real," one of them spat. "The vulture lives." The name rippled through their ranks, panic seeding in their eyes. The leader rode forward, black hat low, scar cutting across his jaw. His voice carried like gravel. "Didn't think you'd crawl out from your hole. Clara, thought grief broke in your claws." Her jaw clenched. "You burn my past. You won't touch this land." He sneered. "This land or that man?" His gun pointed at Jacob, still crouched behind the barn. Clara's revolver lifted, slow, steady. "You'll leave him out of this." Laughter rolled through the gang, but it cracked at the edges. The leader spat. "You and me, then, just like old times." One draw. Sunset decides. The canyon air held its breath. Shadows stretched long as the last light bled across the ridge. Clara stepped into the open, holster loose, hand hovering. Jacob wanted to call her back, but his throat locked. The leader dismounted, boots sinking into the dust. His men spread wide, torches blazing. The world narrowed to two figures facing each other in the dying sun. Silence. The wind carried a single crow's cry. Then hands moved. Her draw was faster. The crack of her gun shattered the hush. His weapon clattered from his hand before he even hit the ground. The outlaw leader sprawled in the dust, breath rattling, eyes wide with disbelief. Gasps tore through the gang. Torches wavered. One by one, horses reared, men fled into the canyon, leaving their leader broken at Clara's feet. Jacob rose from cover, rifle still clutched, eyes fixed on her. She stood unmoving, smoke curling from a revolver, chest heaving once. Then, slow, she lowered the gun. The leader groaned, coughed blood, whispered hoarse. Vulture, always a vulture, his eyes dimmed, body stilled. Clara knelt, pressed her palm into the dust beside him, head bowed. When she rose, the revolver hung loose in her hand. "I'm done," she said, voice hoarse. The gun fell into the dirt with a hollow thud. The flames at the fence line guttered out, leaving only the crackle of dying embers. The ranch stood scarred, but it still stood. Jacob walked to her, boots crunching in the silence. He reached for her hand, calloused and trembling. "You weren't hired for this," he said softly. Her eyes lifted, weary but unbroken. "I was hired to clean. I cleaned more than floors tonight." For the first time, her face eased, a shadow of peace crossing her features. The storyteller's voice would linger here, in the hush after gunfire. They say the widower hired her only to clean, but what he needed most was her heart. And what the canyon needed, what the land itself remembered, was her legend. For when the dust of solitude met the shadows of the canyon, the vulture rose one last time, then laid her wings to rest.